This is a speech about vegetarian diets, and I want to talk about whether a vegetarian diet is healthier than an omnivorous diet or a carnivorous diet. Many people believe that it's healthier to be a vegetarian, and on the whole they think this because of epidemiological evidence from countries where the majority of the population is vegetarian, for example India. Those populations tend to be healthier. They have lower rates of heart disease, they have lower rates of cancer, and by the way, it's well established now that eating red meat is definitely associated with bowel cancer, and barbecued meat is particularly bad. If you like your sausages charred at the edges, then you're in trouble. And those populations also tend to have lower rates of illnesses such as arthritis or obesity and all the comorbidities that go along with obesity. And on the whole, this better health in these populations is attributed to a lower consumption of saturated fat because they're not eating meat, a higher consumption of fruit and vegetables, and a higher consumption of whole grains. But are these assumptions true? And what do I think about this? I should point out at this stage that I am a nutritionist myself and that I hold a Master of Medical Science from the University of Sheffield. So I believe that although it is possible to have a healthy vegetarian diet, including a healthy vegan diet, although that's more difficult and you have to be careful because you can easily suffer from a deficiency of vitamin B12 if you're a vegan. So although it is possible to have a healthy vegetarian diet, it takes effort, and often vegetarian diets are not particularly healthy. I want to explain why and give you 4 reasons why vegetarian diets can often be quite unhealthy. Number 1, vegetarian diets can be very high in saturated fat, rather unexpectedly. This is because people tend to rely far too much on dairy products. They think, I'm no longer eating meat, I'd better eat lots of cheese, or drink lots of milk, or eat lots of yogurt. And the reason that people turn to dairy products as a meat substitute is because they think they need protein, because they're no longer getting the protein from meat. But here in the West, we tend to eat far too much protein anyway. You don't need a lot of protein to survive. You only need about 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight, which for me is only about 40 or 45 grams of protein per day, less than 2 ounces. So unfortunately for me, a tiny little bit of cheese, whereas in fact I love cheese. The second problem with vegetarian diets is that they can be very high in salt. This is because people tend to replace the meat in their diets with something like corn that you can go out and buy in the shops, or TVP, textured vegetable protein, or even something like peanut butter, which is very high in protein but is also high in salt. So that's not very good for you. Third point is this business of, do vegetarians actually eat more whole grains? And on the whole, the answer to that is no, because when people switch to a vegetarian diet, they don't automatically replace white bread, white flour, white pasta with wholemeal bread, brown pasta, brown flour. So they still eat an awful lot of refined carbohydrates, and these refined carbohydrates are bad for you because they lead to a peak in insulin release in your body, and over the longer term that can lead to you developing diabetes. So, high in saturated fat, high in salt, not enough whole grains, and the fourth reason is that vegetarian diets can lack variety. People are not always very imaginative, so when they need a snack, they reach for something like cheese on toast, or scrambled eggs on toast, or pasta. So you don't get that varied diet with lots of different fruit and vegetables and whole grains. Clearly, therefore, for optimum health, we shouldn't be consuming a vegetarian diet. We should be consuming a different kind of diet. And let me tell you what that diet should look like. For a start, it should definitely include fish, because there's very strong evidence that fish is good for you. I think what we should all do is switch to a Stone Age diet and go back to the era when we were all hunter-gatherers, because hunter-gatherers had a very varied and healthy diet. They would roam around picking any berries and grains that they could find. If they were near the sea, then they could eat some shellfish. Perhaps they could find some eggs in a bird's nest or something. and the meat that they ate was typically very lean because it was all wild game. So it wasn't meat that had been farmed, reared, which can be very fatty. And they could obtain all the calcium that they needed and all the iron from lots of different food sources instead of relying on staple foods, which if you eat them over and over again can lead to allergies. And some people think that's why, for example, there are so many celiacs now, because we rely so heavily on wheat in our diet. So a Stone Age diet is very varied, it's very healthy, and let's not forget also that it can be cheap. All you have to do is go out there and start foraging, picking blackberries or gooseberries along the lanes and hedgerows, elderflowers, why not? And what better way to get hold of lean meat than roadkill? Thank you.